My name's Kira Jennings. I'm 55 years old, and until last Friday, I'd spent the last 15 years of my life at a company called TechVantage. I was sitting across from Marjorie Thompson, my boss, in one of those small, sterile conference rooms they always use for bad news. Denise from HR sat next to her, clutching a manila folder like it was a shield. Marjorie's voice was smooth, almost too smooth, as she said the words I already knew were coming. "We're restructuring your position." She tried to code it in fake regret, her smile tight, her tone just a little too satisfied. Denise nodded along, chiming in about new directions and changing company priorities, all while sliding the severance package across the table like it was some kind of peace offering. I didn't even bother opening the folder. I knew exactly what was inside. A standard severance, 2 weeks' pay for every year I'd given them, a few months of health coverage, and a list of outplacement services I'd never use. I just nodded, calm as ever. "I completely understand," I said, my voice steady, almost cheerful. For a second, relief flashed across their faces, like they'd been bracing for tears, for begging, for me to make a scene. They weren't expecting this kind of composure, especially not from a woman like me. A woman over 50, in an industry that worships 25-year-olds with shiny new degrees. They thought they were getting rid of some relic who wouldn't know what hit her. But what they didn't know was that I'd been ready for this. Weeks earlier, I'd stumbled across an email thread I was never meant to see. A conversation between senior leadership discussing my phasing out, as they so delicately put it. They weren't even subtle about it. They planned it like a merger. Cold, strategic, profitable. The moment I read it, something inside me settled. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. Just resolved. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Marjorie kept talking, clearly emboldened by my silence. "We'll need your key card, your laptop, and your phone by Friday," she said, almost briskly now. "Your team will be informed this afternoon." My team. 6 of the brightest engineers I'd ever had the privilege to lead. We'd built the foundation of TechVantage's flagship software together, the very product that had made them a household name. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood up, smooth and deliberate, and slipped the folder into my bag. "Is there anything else?" I asked. They exchanged a quick glance, a little surprised, maybe even a little unsettled. "No," Marjorie said, quickly flashing that corporate smile again. "Thank you for being so professional." I gave a polite nod and walked out of the room, my heart strangely light. As I passed the executive conference room, I caught a glimpse through the glass walls. Victor Lawson, the CEO himself, was gesturing animatedly at a PowerPoint slide about revenue projections. The same Victor who, just months ago, had stood on a stage and taken full credit for the algorithm I had created, barely mentioning my name at all. "Just one of our brilliant researchers," he'd said. Like I was a footnote. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. Because in that moment, I realized something that made my chest tighten with a quiet kind of fury. They thought they were discarding me, but they were really setting me free. You know, betrayal has a funny way of teaching you who you really are and who you never needed in the first place. Have you ever seen betrayal coming before it hit you? If you have, share your story below. I'd love to hear it. That night, after the meeting with Marjorie and Denise, I sat alone in my car for a moment, just breathing, letting the weight of it all settle on my shoulders. Then I pulled out my personal phone, the one they couldn't touch, and sent a single text. "It's happening. Friday's my last day." The reply came almost instantly. "Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight?" I smiled to myself, the first real smile I'd felt in weeks. Gregory Sullivan wasn't just any contact. He was the CEO of Precision Systems, TechVantage's biggest competitor, and someone who understood exactly what I brought to the table. That evening, we met at Meridian, an upscale restaurant tucked away far from the TechVantage campus. Greg had reserved a private alcove, hidden behind elegant wooden screens. It was the kind of place where important deals were made quietly. He was already there when I arrived, standing to greet me with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "They actually did it," he said, shaking his head as we sat down. I had a feeling they might, but cutting the person who built the foundation of their success. I shrugged, reaching for my glass of water. "Victor never really understood what I created," I said. "He loved the flashy parts, the user interface, the marketing, buzzwords. But the real heart of it, the architecture, that was just background noise to him." Greg leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. "And they still haven't filed the patent?" I shook my head slowly. "Nope. 3 months ago, I found out by accident. They kept promising they were on it, but the more I dug, the more obvious it became. They had no intention of giving me proper attribution. They wanted to quietly claim it all as company developed, and then push me out before I noticed." Greg's mouth tightened in anger, but I just smiled, feeling that quiet fire burn inside me again. "What they didn't realize," I continued, "was that I'd been working on improvements to the algorithm, on my own time, using my own equipment. Enhancements they didn't even know about. And those improvements, they're mine, not TechVantage's." I pulled a small flash drive from my bag and slid it across the table. "I filed for a new patent last month. Full documentation, full timestamps, full ownership. And thanks to your lawyer," I added with a grateful smile, "it went through faster than I ever thought possible." Greg grinned, pulling a folder from his own briefcase. "All the paperwork's finalized. Precision Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent, and we're welcoming you as our new Chief Innovation Officer." He opened the folder, showing me the pages inside. Signing bonus, equity, ongoing royalties, respect, real respect. I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table. I was building my own. "They never even valued what they didn't understand," I said quietly, almost to myself. Greg lifted his glass in a silent toast. I clinked mine against his. This wasn't just a new beginning. It was justice, the kind you build carefully, quietly, and thoroughly. And by Monday, the world would know exactly who Kira Jennings was. The next 2 days moved in a strange kind of blur. Thursday was a carousel of exit interviews and transition meetings, every conversation feeling more hollow than the last. Denise from HR checked off her boxes with robotic efficiency, barely meeting my eyes. It was as if they thought if they moved fast enough, they could erase me without ever having to sit with what they'd done. In the hallways, people gave me these looks. Quiet, uneasy glances. The kind you give someone at a funeral when you don't know what to say. Some of the junior developers, kids I'd mentored fresh out of college, approached me awkwardly, asking if I'd still be willing to leave them LinkedIn recommendations. I smiled and said, of course. What else was there to say? Back at my office, I packed slowly, taking my time with the things that actually mattered. A framed photo of my daughters from their college graduations. A stack of conference badges. 15 years worth of industry events where I'd worn a name tag that meant something. The coffee mug my team gave me last Christmas. It said "World's Best Brain," a private joke about the long nights we spent debugging code over bad takeout. Each item went into the box with careful hands, as if the weight of those memories needed a kind of respect that the company hadn't bothered to give me. I was wrapping up my Employee of the Year award, the same award I'd received for developing the very algorithm that had built TechVantage's empire, when Marjorie appeared in my doorway. She leaned against the frame, pretending casualness, though I could see the tightness in her smile. "Just wanted to make sure everything's clear for your departure," she said, eyes flickering to the half-packed box. "Crystal clear," I replied, tucking the award between layers of tissue paper without looking up. She lingered there for a moment, maybe expecting me to crumble, or plead, or lash out. When I didn't, she tried another angle. "You know," she said, softening her voice, "these restructuring decisions are never personal. Victor just feels we need to move in a more youthful direction." I met her gaze directly then, steady and unblinking. "I understand completely," I said, my tone so even that for the first time, real uncertainty flickered across her face. But she quickly brushed it off, the way people do when they're convinced they've already won. "Will you be taking some time off?" she asked, feigning concern. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, but a genuine one, because for the first time in a long while I was smiling for myself. "Actually, I already have something lined up," I said. "I start Monday." That surprised her. I could see it hit, quick and sharp. "Oh," she stammered. "Anything interesting?" I slipped the last item, a small framed quote that had always sat on my desk, into the box. It read, "Value your work, even when others don't." I closed the flaps gently and looked up. "Very interesting," I said simply. "A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it." She nodded absently, already mentally filing me away into the past. That was fine, because I wasn't stuck there anymore. As I walked through TechVantage's gleaming glass lobby for the last time, box in arms, I paused just once, turning to take a final look at the place where I had given 15 years of my life. 15 years of building, creating, lifting others up. All reduced to a severance packet and a polite, "Thanks for your service." But I wasn't bitter, not anymore, because walking out those doors wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something I had built myself. Something no layoff, no restructuring, no CEO could ever take away. And as the cool air hit my face, I realized I wasn't carrying a box full of memories. I was carrying proof that I had always been worth more than they ever saw. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, like the universe was giving me a little wink. I woke up earlier than usual, my nerves buzzing with the kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. No dread, no second-guessing, just excitement. I slipped into the new charcoal gray suit I had picked out just for this day, something strong, sharp, and unmistakably mine. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the Precision Systems town car pulled up in front of my house. The driver greeted me with a smile, took my bag, and held the door open like I was someone who mattered. It was a small thing, but after so many years of being overlooked, it meant everything. When I arrived at Precision Systems headquarters, they didn't shuffle me through the side door or make me wait awkwardly in the lobby. They welcomed me like a true part of the team. My new assistant handed me a folder as soon as I stepped inside. "The press release went live at 7 a.m., she said with a smile. "Industry news outlets are already picking it up." I walked into my new corner office, a real one this time, with floor-to-ceiling windows and sunlight spilling across the desk, and sat down, savoring the moment. Gregory popped his head in a few minutes later, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "It's already happening," he said. "Check this out." He handed me his tablet. Every major tech news site was buzzing with the announcement. Precision Systems acquires exclusive rights to breakthrough algorithm, appoints inventor Kira Jennings as Chief Innovation Officer. It spelled it out in black and white. My name, my work, my recognition, and right there in the fine print. All companies currently using the technology must now negotiate licensing agreements with Precision Systems moving forward. I couldn't stop the small laugh that escaped me. It wasn't a laugh of cruelty. It was the sound of justice, quiet, steady, inevitable. By 9:15 a.m., the first ripple had hit TechVantage. Miguel, my lead developer and one of my most trusted team members, sent me a text. "Complete chaos here. What did you do?" I just smiled, texting him back. "Check your personal email. Good things are coming." Meanwhile, back at TechVantage headquarters, Victor Lawson, the CEO who had barely remembered my name when he took credit for my work, was finding out the hard way that ignoring your builders has a cost. Miguel kept the updates coming, play by play, like it was a game. Victor showed up late to the Monday executive meeting, still smoothing down his tie, probably thinking it was just another day, until the general counsel and CFO intercepted him at the door, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. Apparently, the announcement had hit their inboxes at the same time it hit the industry newswires, and in a matter of minutes, the calm, polished facade of TechVantage cracked wide open. By 9:30 a.m., what should have been a standard revenue meeting had turned into an emergency crisis session. Board members were dialing in from around the country. The legal team was frantically digging through every old document and contract they could find, desperate for any loophole. IT had started pulling servers from the research division, hoping, against hope, they could find something to claim. But it was too late. The paper trail was mine. The patent was mine. And the future they thought they could steal? That was mine too. At 10:45 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Victor himself. "Kira," it read, "there appears to be a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling not anger, not gloating, but something deeper, a quiet confirmation that I had played the long game and won. Without a word, I forwarded the email to Precision Systems' legal team. Then I turned off my phone and went back to work, because I wasn't fighting for a place at someone else's table anymore. I was building a new one, and this time, my name was carved right into the wood. The rest of that Monday unfolded like something out of a slow-motion disaster movie. And honestly, it was hard not to watch. Miguel kept the updates coming, little text messages that lit up my phone every few minutes. "They're pulling servers from the research floor. It's like a crime scene down here," he wrote, followed by, "Victor is pacing the executive hallway like a caged animal." I could almost picture it. Victor shouting questions, demanding answers, tossing blame at anyone within arm's reach. But the thing about panic is, it's loud. It spreads. And it wasn't just the leadership team feeling it anymore. By lunchtime, the rumors had exploded across the company. Word was out. TechVantage had lost control of their most valuable asset, and nobody knew what that meant for their future. The stock price started slipping before the market had even fully absorbed the news. First 2%, then 5%. By the time the East Coast trading closed, TechVantage shares had fallen a full 7%. Meanwhile, Precision Systems, my new home, had jumped 12%. Funny how quickly the world rebalances itself when the truth comes out. And the real kicker? Their biggest clients, the Fortune 500 companies who relied on TechVantage's flagship product, started calling. Greg swung by my office mid-afternoon, grinning like he'd just hit the jackpot. "2 major clients already reached out," he said. "Both want to talk to us about switching over before things at TechVantage get worse." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Because while the executives were scrambling upstairs, downstairs, real people, good people, then were scared. People I had mentored, people I cared about. So after a moment of thought, I pulled out my phone again. I sent a short, private email to my former team, Miguel, and the 5 engineers who had built everything alongside me. "Check your personal emails," I wrote. "You have offers waiting. Positions at Precision Systems, senior roles, better pay, and above all, respect. It didn't take long for the replies to roll in. Miguel was first. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Then Priya. Thank you for not forgetting about us. One by one, they all said yes. I leaned back in my chair, letting it wash over me. Because this wasn't just about me moving forward. It was about bringing the people who actually mattered with me. The people who had helped build the future and deserved to be part of it. Meanwhile, across town, Tech Vantage was trying to put out a 5-alarm fire with a leaky garden hose. Victor tried to project calm, Miguel told me, hosting an emergency town hall meeting to reassure employees that everything was under control, but the cracks were showing. The way he stammered through vague promises. The way Marjorie looked pale and glassy-eyed at his side. The way the senior developers whispered in the hallways. LinkedIn profiles already quietly updated and refreshed. No corporate email blast was going to undo what had already happened, because once trust breaks, you can't patch it up with words. You either have it or you don't. And Tech Vantage? They had lost it. All of it. By the time I left the office that evening, the sky had turned a soft gold. I stood there for a moment in the parking lot, breathing it all in, not in a way that felt like gloating, but in a way that felt right. Because after 15 years of being told to wait my turn, or be grateful, or stay patient, it was finally my turn. And I wasn't just walking into a new chapter. I was writing it. Of course, Tech Vantage wasn't just going to roll over quietly. By Wednesday, there were murmurs about a lawsuit. Nothing official, just whispered threats from their legal team, trying to save face. They hinted that I had somehow taken proprietary technology with me when I left. When I first heard it, I actually laughed a little. Not because it wasn't serious, but because I knew exactly what they were doing. It was pure desperation. A last-ditch scare tactic. Gregory's legal team, though, they were ready. These weren't fresh out of law school types clutching their briefcases like life preservers. These were the kind of lawyers who could dismantle a case before it even reached a courtroom. I sat across from them that afternoon, sipping coffee while they flipped through all the paperwork I'd filed months earlier. The provisional patents, the ownership filings, the clean digital trails. Every piece of evidence locked down tight, time-stamped, and indisputable. Let them try, Gregory's head of legal said, almost amused. We'd love to meet them in court. I smiled into my coffee. Because the truth was, I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I'd spent too much of my life second-guessing myself, waiting for permission, trusting that if I just worked hard enough, played by the rules long enough, the system would protect me. But somewhere along the way, I had learned a harder truth. Sometimes, you have to be your own shield. Sometimes you have to protect your future before anyone else even sees it coming. When I filed that improved version of the algorithm under my own name, quietly, methodically, without a single misstep, it wasn't out of spite. It was out of survival. It was a line in the sand. Because deep down, I knew. They didn't value what I had created. They didn't even understand it. They saw a woman over 50 and assumed they had time. Assumed I would go quietly. Assumed wrong. So now, while they scrambled for lawyers and typed angry emails full of empty threats, I was free. Free to build, free to innovate, free to finally do what I was meant to do, without asking for permission. And honestly, there's no better feeling in the world. It's funny how quickly you can feel the difference when you finally land somewhere you're truly valued. At Precision Systems, people didn't just tolerate my ideas, they listened. They didn't roll their eyes when I pointed out a risk, or pat me on the hand like I was someone's overly cautious aunt. They leaned in. They asked questions. They treated me like my experience mattered, because it did. And I'll be honest, that kind of respect? It takes a minute to get used to. when you've spent years being quietly gaslit into believing you didn't deserve it. At TechVantage, I used to sit through endless meetings where I'd offer solutions, only to have someone else, usually a younger guy with a louder voice, repeat my exact words 5 minutes later and get praised for it. At the time, I told myself it was just the way things were. I didn't want to seem bitter or difficult, so I smiled, I nodded, I worked harder. I shrank myself, hoping they'd notice my value without me having to shout for it. But sitting at that polished new conference table at Precision, where my title actually reflected my contributions, where people called me by name when quoting my ideas, something in me started to heal. I wasn't invisible anymore. One afternoon, Greg pulled me into his office, grinning like he had a secret. He slid a report across the desk. I scanned it once, then twice, just to make sure I was seeing it right. Several of TechVantage's biggest clients, the ones they had proudly boasted about for years, were starting to shift their contracts over to us. Not rumors, not vague promises. Signed letters of intent. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't just about the wins. It was about what those wins meant. Because these weren't just companies following the newest trend. They were companies making a statement. They were saying, we see the real value. We see where the innovation truly lives. And quietly, without any big speeches or dramatic revenge fantasies, the truth was starting to surface. TechVantage wasn't falling because I wished it. They were falling because they had built their empire on undervaluing the very people who had made them strong. And eventually, that rot eats its way through the foundation. Meanwhile, at Precision, we were building something better, something real, something that didn't need smoke and mirrors to survive. Somewhere deep down, a younger version of myself, the woman who used to wonder if maybe she was the problem, finally stood a little taller. Because she had never been the problem. She had been the solution all along. It didn't take long before the cracks at TechVantage turned into full-on collapse. About 3 weeks after the first clients jumped ship, the news broke. Victor Lawson had been forced to resign. It wasn't a graceful exit either. From what I heard, the board gave him a choice: step down quietly or face a very public firing. He chose the quieter path, but no one was fooled. His face, once plastered across glossy tech magazines as the visionary leader, now looked worn and defeated in the press release announcing his departure. And he wasn't the only one. Marjorie, who once stood at the door smiling as she shoved me out, was next. Followed closely by the head of their legal department, the same man who had whispered threats about lawsuits just a few weeks earlier. It was almost surreal watching it all unfold. One by one, the architects of my dismissal were dismantled by the very system they had tried to control. The stock continued to slide. More clients fled. Their once ironclad reputation started to crumble. But here's the thing. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way you might expect. I didn't dance on their professional graves or pop champagne over their downfall. There was no dramatic monologue, no villainous laugh. Instead, what I felt was something much quieter, a deep, steady satisfaction, the kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from recognition. Because this wasn't about taking them down. It was about finally being seen for what I was worth, without having to scream for it, without having to apologize for it. One morning, about a month after Victor's resignation, I got an email from the new interim CEO of TechVantage. It was polite, respectful even. They wanted to discuss licensing my patented work, formally and fairly, to continue offering support to their remaining clients. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the screen. A year ago, they wouldn't have even returned my calls. Now they were asking for my permission, on my terms. I forwarded the email to Precision's legal team, just like before, but this time with a small smile on my face. Not a spiteful smile, not an arrogant one, just a quiet, knowing smile. Because recognition, when it finally comes, doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need headlines or applause. Sometimes, it's enough just to know that you held the line, that you protected yourself when no one else would, that you built something no one could take away from you. And as I leaned back in my chair, watching the sun spill through my office window, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. A few months later, I found myself standing backstage at one of the biggest tech conferences in the country, the kind of event that used to make me feel small. I still remembered the first time I came to this conference years ago. Back then, I sat near the back, clutching my notebook, too nervous to even ask a question at the panels. Nobody knew my name. Nobody cared about the quiet woman from TechVantage, scribbling ideas in the margins of a program booklet. But today, my name was printed in bold letters across the massive screen on stage. Kira Jennings, Chief Innovation Officer at Precision Systems. Keynote speaker. I adjusted the microphone clipped to my blazer and took one last steadying breath as they called me up. And when I stepped into the spotlight, something shifted. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition. Real, earned recognition. Spoke about innovation, about resilience, about how sometimes the biggest breakthroughs aren't just about technology. They're about refusing to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's small vision. I told the audience pieces of my story, not as a tale of revenge, but as a lesson in value, in self-respect, in knowing when to stop waiting for permission and start claiming your space. When I finished, the applause was thunderous, not polite, not perfunctory, genuine. Afterwards, as I stepped off stage, I was surrounded. But this time, it wasn't executives looking for a quick soundbite. It was young women, aspiring engineers, fresh faces full of fire and hope, clutching notebooks and iPads, asking if I had a few minutes, asking if I could share advice, asking if I would mentor them. I saw myself in every single one of them. And right there, in that noisy, buzzing hallway, I realized something even bigger than any lawsuit, any stock drop, any executive shuffle. This right here, was the real victory. Not the downfall of the people who had doubted me, but the rising of the people who would come after me, stronger because someone paved the road a little wider. Later that evening, while I was still floating a little from it all, an email came through. It was from the new CEO at TechVantage, a formal acknowledgement, an apology, a genuine invitation to collaborate on future initiatives, as equals. I read it twice, then set it down without responding right away, because it wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to the people who had once overlooked me. It was about proving something to the woman I used to be, the one who sat in the back of the room, hoping someone would see her. She didn't have to hope anymore. She had become the person she needed. And now, she was the one lighting the way for others. 1 year later, almost to the day, Greg and I sat across from each other at a little rooftop bar downtown, the city skyline glowing behind us. He lifted his glass toward mine, grinning wide. "To Precision Systems," he said, "officially surpassing TechVantage in market value as of this morning." I clinked my glass against his, smiling in a way that felt deeper than just celebration, because it wasn't about beating TechVantage. Not really. It was about building something that lasted, something honest, something that didn't just use innovation as a marketing word, but actually lived it. I looked around at the people gathered with us that night. My old team, now thriving, leading their own projects. New faces, too. Bright, determined, full of ideas and hope. And I realized this was the victory, not the headlines, not the numbers on a stock ticker. The real win was knowing that my work, my ideas, my name, they finally stood on their own. I found peace in that. A kind of quiet peace I didn't even know I'd been searching for. Because for so many years, I thought the goal was just survival. Keeping my head down, doing good work, hoping someone would notice. But now I knew better. Success isn't just surviving. It's being seen. It's standing tall and knowing you deserve every inch of the ground beneath your feet. And maybe, just maybe, it's making it easier for the next person to stand tall too. So here's to every builder, every dreamer, every person who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside. Keep going, keep building, because your time is coming too. If you believe real innovation deserves real credit, I'd love for you to leave a like, share your thoughts below, or even subscribe. Let's change the game together, one story at a time.